saying it's Friday, and the reason we know is because we're at another happy hour. So that feels good to have that and to see all of your smiling faces. For those of you who may have forgotten since the last one, or may have also be with us for the first time, one, welcome, and two, you probably all know, I remember on the first call that we did, we were like, mute your phone, and this is how it all works. We all know that by now. But if you do have questions throughout, feel free to use the chat box. Happy to jump in, and we're going to kind of split this. We're going to start a little bit of a new format where the first half will really be talking to our guests and kind of hearing from them and really having a dialogue that's a little broader. And then we'll roll into as many questions as we can all handle, with or without an adult premium beverage or tea or whatever your fancy is. Do be respectful and be a good listener. I know it's been a long week for many of you, but I promise you, if we don't get to your question, we will make sure that it's answered in some way or fashion. And then also that we're recording this. And, I have to say that many of you know that Northwest Film Center has been a part of the Portland Art Museum for a really long time, but I'm always so excited to have new folks and new faces join this group. And we've really been kind of growing exponentially each week. And I think it's really exciting that all of you have been sharing with your friends and colleagues to come and listen, and also that our board has. So everyone from our film committee to members of our Portland Art Museum board are really encouraged and excited and are joining. And so we, starting next week, there may be some additional new faces, but just to give everybody a heads up there that we want to keep blending filmmakers, funders, board members, and people from all over. And, we're going to continue to also share this out in the larger community. So just to be very open and frank, this goes out to 120,000 people each week. And so it's not just serving all of us and our individual or company needs. Hi, Rose Bond, I'm so happy to see you. But it also is serving the larger community, and that's the point. December alluded to this a minute ago, but this is co-hosted between the Northwest Film Center and the amazing Tim Williams and all the folks, I say that lightly, but all the folks at Oregon Film. It's a small but mighty crew over there, so we're very thankful to you, Tim, for that. And based on your feedback, we're really going to be going off of what you all are wanting to know and what all you're hearing out there that you think will be relevant. And one of the things that came up on the last call was it's amazing how wonderful our Oregon community and our Portland community has come together to info share and be with each other at this time. But it's also really important to figure out how we're going to sustain. So one of those ways, obviously, is our creative folks are creative here locally, but they're also working out of LA, working out of other places and making sure that they can sustain with other colleagues in those places. So we're super excited to have the president of Film Independent and a dear old friend. And I don't say old because you're old, but because you and I have been friends since we were very young, since we were in our 20s, and now we're in our 30s, and things are going really well. But I'm so touched, Josh, that you made the time to be with all of us up here in the Northwest, your neighbors to the north, and talk to us a little bit about Film Independent, what you guys are doing in this moment, and what things feel like, both very close by and very far away in LA. So thank you so much, Josh, for being a part. And if you don't mind kicking us off with some of those fun facts, we'd be appreciative.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I have a strong love-hate relationship with Zoom at this point. I mean, I love it for gatherings like this. And I do feel like there are creative opportunities that it's opened up. Frankly, there's stuff we could have been doing all along, using tools like Zoom that we weren't previously, and now we're sort of forced to, and there's a lot of good that comes out of it, in addition to the endless meetings and, too much time being on camera in your pajamas and stuff like that. But, from Los Angeles, I don't know. I mean, I suspect that this is so global, and there's I feel like we're probably wrestling with a lot of the exact same issues that everyone in Portland and the Pacific Northwest is, which is, in terms of in the film space, you alluded to the question of sustainability. That is that's always been a topic of concern in the independent film ecosystem. How do filmmakers have sustainable careers? How do distributors have a sustainable business model? How does the nonprofit sector sustain itself? And now it's never been more acute. So I just feel like we're on every level, we're wrestling with that. but you know, I mean, the overriding thing to me, I would say, is just like, forget film for a minute. I feel like the thing that we're dealing with the most in terms of myself, staff, filmmakers, is just talking to people as human beings. It has nothing to do with film. It has to do with like, do I have health insurance? Did I just lose my job? Do I have, am I gonna get evicted? Like, it's the most basic human concerns and fears are what our people are focused, really understandably. And so like, we are trying to shift, you know, to maintain conversations around film and creativity and film education and all of that, but it's by the reality that we're all living through. So it's just being mindful of that and talking to people just like in purely human terms about what's going on, as much as about film. But you know, I will say, so Film Independent, for anyone who's not familiar with us, we're an independent film organization based in we're a membership organization. Our membership is made up of filmmakers and film lovers. A lot of people know us best, the Independent Spirit Awards, but year round we have programs to support emerging and mid-career writers, directors, and producers. And those programs in the last few years have really broadened out internationally quite a bit. We have programs in the Middle East and all of our programs, like I'm sure everyone here, all of our programs are physically on hold. We're not meeting up, and it's all moved online pretty successfully. I mean, I think our artist development and education programs made the transition pretty, I mean, it's not the same, but we're able to do a lot of things in terms of supporting filmmakers simply in Zoom or in an online format. And piece, because we found that has really been, we're in the middle of an international residency right now with 12 writers and producers, and it's a really strong, robust program. It was supposed to be in LA in person, but we had to pivot, and we did, and it's continuing. You know, we've had online talks on Zoom and Facebook Live with filmmakers from India and Egypt and France, different countries where you're able, because of we're forced into it, you're suddenly able to have a panel discussion with people on 3 continents. But yeah, it's just an unbelievably challenging moment of going back to the sustainability of everyone. And you know, it's not knowing, the fact that we don't know the future at all, just makes it very hard to plan or say, okay, well, if we get through the next month, we'll be okay. Or if we get through the next 2 months, we'll be okay. It's like, I have no earthly idea what's going to happen. And that's a scary place to live. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing all of that, Josh. And I think just to pivot for a second, we also have Brian Lord on the call. And, you know, I think that's top of mind for everyone. And both Brian and Tim, I'm going to ask you next, if you could really talk a little bit about what you're seeing here this week. I don't mean that in a flip way. It just, everything changes so quickly. But this week in Portland and in Oregon, just around production and what you're hearing. And obviously, you know, with what Josh said in mind as well, I think it's really important to note that what we hear this week might be totally different next week. But if we could talk a little bit about production, both from the kind of live action and production side of things, but also animation, I think that could be really helpful to folks as well, just to get a toehold and you know, some of the calls that I think we've all been on.
Yeah, and I'll let Tim dig in deep onto, you know, some of the bigger things going at the state level, but at the city level, specific to film, we've literally had 1 permit go out for filming downtown in the last 2 months. It happened last week. It went really well. The process was, from the city's perspective, was just asking the production to be specific about how they were going to adhere to the social distancing guidelines. It worked well with our B-roll permit program. They had a small crew, which aligned with the B-roll guidelines. Their work around the social distancing in terms of how they arrived, you know, by vehicle and where they shot, it went very smoothly. So in that respect, the city is open for filming within the small crew size. The parks program is shut down for permitting and for all kind of social, gatherings of all sorts until June 6th at this point. And the way that staff is being allocated is such that it's not that a one-off for film production would be accommodated just by way of the way that the park staff is allocated currently. They couldn't kind of come out of, they're in a kind of a mothball phase like everybody else is, and it wouldn't be feasible for them until June 6th to change that around. And that's not just specific to parks. As a quick aside, I'm imagining somebody was scouting today. We were conversing by email today, and he was asking about parks, and I gave him the update on parks, and he was kicking the tires on, looking at the Moda Center or another facility. But I was just speculating out loud, does the Moda Center and other facilities have the staff ready to go, kind of the way that the film works, especially with our timelines of, we're filming in 3 days, 3 days, no, 3 weeks, probably not, 3 months, hopefully, so the way that the way that the facilities are operating, I'm speculating that it's not just the city that is unable to turn things around in 3 days or less, the way that we've gotten accustomed to. So some of my other work, independent of kind of having the permit program frozen, is around some of that phase 2 relief and recovery within the city. I'm working, the Portland Film Office is nested within Prosper Portland, and so I'm on some work groups within the staff there around kind of what we're able to do within what we're calling the phase 2 relief and recovery. That phase 1 was around our grant and loan programs. And so phase 2 is, what are we doing kind of adjacent to financial response? What is some of the technical assistance that we can lend to small business, either pivoting or just a general response? What are we as small business owners able to do? For example, if you're a 200 seat restaurant and you can only have 100 people in your restaurant at a time, how is that going to work for your operating costs? So just, we're sifting through some of that in-house so that we can be helpful going out there. So, in an era of lower revenue but increased costs relative to, I've been referring to it as of today, the Corona premium. What are we doing around time, scope, cost on everything, not just film production? That's the entire economy. So somehow, I'm going to do my small part to help that. So part of what I'm doing also is working with the communications team at Prosper Portland. I'm now currently running the Twitter feed at Prosper Portland, which is, with great power comes great responsibility. So I'm doing my best to, it's helpful to see kind of what the other teams within Prosper Portland are doing, and then how I can apply that here. So I as the weeks go on, I think I'll be able to kind of add that framework to what we're doing here. So
thank you, Brian. Super helpful. Tim, anything
Absolutely.
you want to add to what you're hearing around production and where that's at this moment?
Yeah. Most of the bigger animation stuff and interactive stuff is happening. They found a way to work around. That's actually been happening for a few weeks, which is good. I think the specific stop motion stuff where you need somebody in a room and more than one person in a room is still trying to find its way with some of the larger features that are in town. But definitely they are working through that, which is good. Those that can work remotely are working remotely. We, as of this week, have just started to talk about what the protocols will be for production to resume in the state. I'm putting a link in the, is that right? Hang on. No, that's not it. Hang on. I'll get you a link in the thing in just a second that says, that sort of talks about the back to work protocols that we're working on right now. So the idea here is, because the governor has issued her guidelines for putting Oregon back to work yesterday, we also sort of started working with a lot of different partners, as well as a lot of individual filmmakers here in town that are trying to figure out what's next for the production things. And there's two things to balance here. There's the need to go back and do things versus the safety issues. And what we don't want to do is have things happen too fast and become unsafe, and then we become the poster child for an industry that is not taking into account the safety and health of its crew and its talent. So we really need to have a bunch of protocols that are put in place that people are agreeing to, about sanitizing equipment, about social distancing, about how to deal with actors, about how to deal with cameras, about how to deal with anything like that. And that's actually starting to happen. So the thing I just posted for people is a post that I just did on the blog about 2 hours ago, where you can contact me with either questions or with things that you have suggestions for that, because this is going to be a slow rollout. It's going to be, right now, there's no more than groups of 10 people that are allowed under the governor's guidelines. So that would mandate a small shoot that can happen. But within that 10 people, there also is, you have to maintain social distancing, you have to maintain disinfectant, you have to maintain, masks and things like that. So there's the PPE question. There's a what to do if people get sick question. So what we don't want to have happen is, we don't want production to just resume without production understanding those changes for safety and health that need to happen on every single set, whether that's a 2-person set or whether that's a 200-person set. So this week has really been a lot about how do we quantify that? How do we make sure people are getting input on that? And then gathering, I'm sure everybody's seen it, of what everybody else is doing. So Sweden and Denmark have their guidelines. The EU has their guidelines. Australia has their guidelines. Some guidelines just came out of LA from a company called Automatic, which are, interesting read if you want to look at them. So I think that's the next step for us, is what does live action, people on set, production look like from the very small to the very large, and how do we make sure that that goes out in a very safe and thoughtful and healthy manner throughout the state. The example I give to everybody that I think would be a disaster is, an example is Harney County, for example, is making an effort down in Salem right now to open up because they've had no COVID cases down there. It would be a disaster for us if suddenly a car commercial decided they wanted to go in Harney County because it was open, and for some reason COVID turns up in Harney County because of a car commercial went out and shot there. So we have to be very careful to stay ahead of this and know that production needs to lead the way. Production is very integrated with all these other industries that are suffering right now. But if production does it wrongly, it will hurt us in the long term. So we need to make sure we do this correctly. So check out the blog post. Let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. My email's in there, and I'm happy to hear from everybody.
Thank you, Tim. That was super helpful. I'm going to go back to Josh for a minute. I know that Josh and Tim and myself and maybe others have also been on a number of calls, on a national level, and talking to everybody from the NEA to colleagues to all sorts of folks. And what seems to have been a consistent thread is that, there's obviously a huge need for artist support at this moment in every sense of the word. But as opposed to week 1 of this, or even week 2, it's now, the 6th week into this pandemic, and there's so much information floating around and not really a central repository for it. Specific to Film Independent, how are you dealing with that, Josh? And how are you and your team kind of guiding people to the resources that they need? And maybe if there are some national resources that that are available, maybe sharing with this group, because I think, I personally went onto one site, I went onto the Kickstarter website, and they have a pretty comprehensive list, but even with a stiff drink, I was overwhelmed. So how are you dealing with this with all your folks?
It is overwhelming because it's also constantly shifting and changing. I think last week, for us, a lot of, not just Film Independent, but a lot of people at production companies I know and post houses, a lot of people were scrambling to get their loans in for the PPP money from the SBA. And there was a ton of, information on how to do that and best practices and what banks to go with and which to avoid and all that. And now the first wave of that has happened. And hopefully a second wave will be coming. But that really took over for a lot of people. At Film Independent, one thing we rolled out this week, and it's small, but it's a first step that we were able to take. We launched a emergency filmmaker support fund. One of our existing funders actually reached out to us and said, I would like to give money directly to filmmakers. So she funded a fund that we administer to give small grants of $500 to $5,000 directly to filmmakers. And right now it's restricted to filmmakers who we previously supported through our artist development programs. So it's a pool of about 2,000 alumni. And we hope to broaden that out. We're still raising money to grow the fund, and we want to be able to serve more filmmakers. But that, I mean, the overwhelming thing filmmakers were telling us they needed was just money to like pay the rent and, you know, basic stuff. So we're focused on greatest needs, which is honestly hard to assess. Everybody has extremely high needs at this point. But we're also looking at filmmakers who might be in post-production on something where they have employees like editors and colorists, where if we can give them a small grant, it can help, you know, keep people employed through that. But yeah, the flow of information, I don't know a good single repository. I'm kind of looking at a lot of different stuff. And it seems like a lot of the resources are still just coming together, you know. And we're trying to find out, like, it's a two-headed thing. We're trying to find funds to support Film Independent and also find funds and resources to support our constituents. So Sony announced, you know, this $100 million COVID relief fund, and we're still trying to figure, it looks like most of that money is going to go to people actually work, you know, crew and cast and crew of Sony projects that were shut down, or it's not going to go to organizations or companies per se for the most part, but we're doing a lot of that sort of investigating. And somewhat frustratingly in Los Angeles, there's not, I feel like New York there's much more support for organizations in New York than there is in LA. I may just not have tapped into the right sources of money yet, but I know the New York City has a lot of support for orgs in the film space. And in LA, it seems much more directed to cast and crew, which is, you know, understandable and great. But we're still just trying to find funds to support our own just general operations.
Great. And I think that there's one more question for me, and then we should open up to the larger group. But I think, you know, one thing that's on people's minds, you know, is everything really shut down? And I mean that in the truest sense, not just production, but for folks that are working on projects or sitting on their couches dreaming about what they want to do. You know, I know there's we had a great conversation last week about festivals that have been shut down, and there was a lot of questions around sales and buyers and distribution. And I imagine, as you and I both talk to filmmakers and artists all day, you're hearing things from them, and probably from producers too, about if sales are happening at this moment, if there are, you know, distribution deals that are hybrids or other things. I'll give one example of where I'm going, but some of you may have heard this week, and we'll say this confidentially and we'll announce this next week, but you know, Neon has partnered with an artist named Matt Wolf on his project Starship Earth. Now, this was a project that had Neon distribution in theaters, and also was going to be released on Hulu and still will be. But what they came up with was a hybrid to support Matt and to support nonprofits, museums, restaurants, all of the ecosystem, by doing a 50-50 split. So what they're going to do is on May 8th, for any of these kinds of organizations that want to, they're going to have a very low price point. It's $3.99. And it will go 50-50 supporting the organization, the restaurant, the beloved bar, and 50% back to Neon and Matt. And so that's on top of a traditional distribution deal, but it also serves the community. And so that's something that we're going to launch on May 8th in partnership with them for Portland, but it's happening in places all over the country. So I'd love to hear from you, and obviously we'll open it up afterwards to others, if you're hearing those kind of innovative hybrid models that are keeping things going through the pipeline at this moment, or are things really just stopped?
So what I hear, first of all, that sounds super cool. I'm going to look into that. That's great.
You should. You can be their LA people.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
The one thing that's not shut down, and this is a bright spot specifically for Film Independent, because it ties into a lot of what we try to offer filmmakers, is development. This is a great time for development. It's a great time for writers. It's a great time for honing your pitches, putting teams together, all of that. And since there's no production, and sales are, at least for the time being, not where they were, and festivals aren't happening. So I have heard from a lot of production companies here, but also from filmmakers. They're taking this time like to really dive in creatively and develop stories and develop scripts. And I mean, that is one thing you can do alone in your house or on a Zoom call. So I do think that's a genuine bright spot here. The sales thing, yeah, I've heard some of that. I mean, I do think for the streaming platforms, there's if this goes on for a long time, there's going to be a pipeline of content running out, and they're going to be buying stuff. I mean, there is this backlog of films now from the festivals that have not happened or that are being postponed indefinitely, where I think you'll see some sales of those things. So I think there's a window of sales, but I haven't heard anything really in terms of what those deals are looking like, or, you know, I can't imagine they're going to be great. Anecdotally, I will say, so I know that a lot of, I'm on this, you know, Google group with the art house convergence theaters, and a lot of them have been doing rev shares with different distributors that are open to it. You know, typically the smaller indies are doing rev shares with the theater to stream a film online. And I think creatively it's great. It's a way of trying something, of getting content out. But in the first few weeks of it, it sounds like the audiences are very small and there's technical problems because people are pivoting and having to release films, and companies aren't used to doing that, and whatever platform they're using to get their stuff out, it's not necessarily going all that great. Hopefully they'll figure out those bugs. At Film Independent, we're not a movie theater, but we have a year-round screening program in LA. Our model in LA has been, our screenings are free to our members. So we're not getting revenue from box office on those. And so they're not ticketed. So the rev share model hasn't been something we've pursued, but we just did a deal with a streaming, just a tech company that has a really good streaming platform. We use them on the Spirit Awards to make the Spirit Award nominated films available. And so we're just this week starting to make films available to our members for free on this platform. But on that model, the distributor has to cover the cost of, you know, encoding the film and getting it up there. So it limits us to distributors or streamers that are able to pick up those costs, because we certainly can't. And so it's a mixed bag, because there's a lot of great independent film. Like there are these films that I'd love to play at, you know, South by and Tribeca titles that, you know, we could do sort of a private screening for our members, but financially it's hard to figure that piece out for us. But yeah, I mean, the exhibition side is really, that's been the hardest for us to figure out. The educational stuff and filmmaker services was pretty easy to figure out on some level, but the screening stuff is trickier. But on the Neon thing, are you saying that, so this film is done? The film is going to be streaming on May 8th. Okay. Mm-hmm. Wow. And had they already
also
acquired?
Slow to adopt. You know, it's been tough, and I think everybody's been looking at this both from an artist perspective and from an exhibition perspective, and going, this is somebody's baby, and you want to do right by somebody's baby, and you want to treat it with the love and support and care that it so richly deserves. So we did. I mean, I think we were one of the few that waited the full 5 weeks or 6 weeks that we're at now, and didn't just post up and say, we're going to do virtual exhibition, because not only were we running revenue models, but we wanted it to be equitable to the folks that had put their blood, sweat, and tears into it. So it's tough ethically too, because you're in a crunched situation. But I think that's just good for everybody to hear that, you know, that these are things that we're all going to experiment. And I saw that there's 2 folks here from Clementine, the film Clementine, and they're also getting ready to release on the 8th. So
cool.
That'd be fun to hear from them as well, about kind of what they're doing, if you want to share. And if not, I won't put you on the spot, but we'll keep the party train rolling. And if you do, you let me know. That's super helpful, Josh. And I think there's a lot of folks on the call that may have questions about production, about what you're hearing in the LA filmmaking community, about some of the resources that Film Independent may be offering right now. Because honestly, as you were saying, it's a great opportunity to think about, okay, this will eventually change the direction of what filmmaking is, what distribution and exhibition is, and what creativity is, and how we all pivot towards that is also beginning to build bridges and connections with colleagues outside of our own community. So that was also a reason to have Josh and Film Independent introduced into this mix, because there's a lot of things that you all are offering that are national and international in scope that will help you, whether you choose to stay right here in Portland and do your work and be fabulous, or whether you're going to be traveling, or whether you're going to be, you know, going back and forth to LA specifically. So if you all have questions or anything around professional development, artist resources, artist development, I think that's, you have the attention of Josh, and I can tell you, even when I come to LA, I only get like 30 minutes with him. So it's use your time to say hi and ask questions, because Film Independent is an invaluable resource and a bridging resource from kind of going into a larger scope and scale and diversifying into television and other things that you all do. So just putting that out there to start the questions rolling.
Well, I don't have a question, but I'll just jump in and add. My name is Amy Lynn Barneyberg, and I'm the producer of Clementine, and just wanted to say a personal thank you to Josh. Film Independent supported Clementine early on. We did our fiscal sponsorship with you guys early on during our crowdfunding time, and then I was also one of the fellows in the producing lab 2018. I don't know what time or year it is anymore. So yes, I highly recommend to everyone look into Film Independent, and they're an amazing, amazing organization. And you guys have been supportive of us from the beginning, and we're actually, so thank you for that, first of all. And we are actually going to be releasing. We were acquired by Oscilloscope for North American distribution, and the original plan was we were going to do a limited theatrical release this summer, May, June, and then go out to VOD and SVOD after that. And then when COVID hit, we obviously were wanting to see what was going to go on, and like everyone, we weren't sure how long quarantine was going to be happening, so we've been talking with them weekly, and finally decided that we didn't want to run the risk of waiting for theaters to open up again, because who knows when that's going to happen, and also just knowing that people are stuck at home and really wanting kind of high quality content and stuff that they haven't seen yet. So we have moved forward with a release date of May 8th, doing a virtual theatrical release, we're calling it. And I'll put, they've created a landing page that I'm gonna put here, but basically they're doing the same model where they are going to theaters, and theaters are signing up to, program the film, and then they set the price point for the film. And then Oscilloscope is splitting half of the ticket sales with the indie theaters. So that's a really awesome way to help support independent theater during this time, especially, our beloved small theaters that run the risk of not being able to make it during COVID. So that was something that was really important to us as filmmakers too. We wanted to do something that could be a way to kind of help support them financially during all of this as well, because we are all in this together. So that's something that we're really excited to be able to take advantage of. And I asked them what platform they're using on that, because I agree there's been some kind of spottiness as far as what works as far as streaming, and they are using Vimeo OTT. So it's a specific form of Vimeo. It's not the very consumer facing one, but I can find out more information for anybody that's interested. But they just used it with one of their other titles that had just come out in theaters when COVID hit, and then they had to pivot quickly to going virtual, and they've had pretty good success. I actually used it the other night, and so it went to my laptop, but then I have Chromecast, so it was easy to just easily cast it to my TV, and which, it's pretty decent size, I guess, that one over there. So it's better than watching on my laptop at least. And so we're feeling confident about that, and also going to be doing hopefully some sponsored kind of virtual Q&As. We're in deep talks right now with our publicists and trying to figure out, are there other opportunities that we can do to help with any fundraising or reaching out to other institutions that have supported us in the past, like Film Independent, just to see, you know, is there something we can be doing with you guys as well? Because yeah, you know, the hope was that we would be able to have a nice big, well, not big necessarily, but a theatrical release, and we still want to celebrate it and, you know, have this kind of big celebration, but it does feel weird with us all just stuck at home. So
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
You know, Amy, I wanted to mention something. So Film Independent produces the Spirit Awards, and to be eligible for the Spirit Awards, our guidelines state a film has to have had a theatrical release in the current year or played one of a handful of festivals. And we made the decision early on that if a film was programmed in one of the qualifying festivals, it would be eligible even if the festival didn't take place. So anything that was programmed for South by this year is eligible for the Spirit Awards. We need to figure out the theatrical piece, because we don't want to do anything to penalize filmmakers, but it actually kind of involves the board of directors voting on this, that we would approve that if a film had a theatrical slated for 2020 and they were bumped to online because of COVID, we'll still accept that film as being eligible. I think, so we haven't officially made that shift yet, but that's kind of what I'm lobbying for. I mean, I don't see any point telling a filmmaker they can't be considered for the awards because of something completely beyond their control, but I know that the Academy's figuring this out too, and yeah.
That's fantastic to hear. Thank you. Yeah, because that's definitely something that was on our mind. We were lucky enough to premiere at one of your qualifying, we premiered at Tribeca last year. So I think we still qualified, but yeah, we were waiting to apply for the awards this year.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like we still qualify even though we premiered last.
You still qualify, yeah, okay, regardless of the theatrical. But
fantastic.
And I think it's important to note for everybody that this is not the time to be shy. These are the times to ask questions of everyone. And I think we just have to be, you know, okay with the uncomfortable notion that sometimes boards of directors have to be involved, sometimes different folks have to be involved, but that people are more open than ever to figuring out how to make the rules work for artists. So there's not a conspiracy against you, but you've got to ask. You know, don't just assume that things are business as usual or that things are going to fly your way. But there's a ton of questions, so I hope you're ready, Josh. I hope you're getting into the second half here. But the next one will be from Alicia. She was asking how Film Independent is pivoting their labs to deal with COVID, and will they all be telezoom? I like that phrase, telezoom, until things change.
Pretty much, yeah. So we've kind of done it already. We moved them online. I mean, right when this thing hit, we were about to start this Middle East residency in LA, and then we also had our documentary lab about to start. And these are typically in-person programs. And then after that was a screenwriting lab. And all of those, we just there's no way they could happen in person. We moved them online, and they were good. They were, honestly, the feedback from filmmakers was, you know, they missed the social aspect. They missed going out to dinner and drinking and getting to know people in that way. But in terms of getting really solid creative feedback and accessibility of mentors and industry input on their projects, it was great. And candidly, I mean, we all know it's everyone's stuck at home. So this is a great time if you're trying to get some big name as a guest speaker or keynote. They're way more likely to say yes now than any other time. So that's been good, but we're not, so we just did our episodic and screenwriting lab. Next up on May 4th, we start our directing lab. And that's been the most challenging, because that's a program where we take a handful of directors who have features that they're prepping, and they're working with actors, and they're putting scenes up on their feet, and they're trying stuff out. And it's very much physical and in the room. And we had to restructure that. We broke it into two parts. The first part is all going to be, which is the bigger part of the lab, is all online. And it's really focused more on story and script feedback. And then also talking with cinematographers and editors and other directors, just conversationally about what's your approach to this project? Have you considered this? Have you considered that? Just like online mentorship that way. But we're reserving, and we don't know when it's going to happen. We're hoping in the summer, like late summer, we'll be able to do a short second part to the directing lab that would be in person, and that would be the more experiential piece with actors putting scenes up and kind of doing, you know, that kind of stuff that you really, it would be hard online. But we'll see like what the world is like in the summer. When we made that decision, I thought, oh yeah, August is going to be great, and now God only knows. But we're aiming for a hybrid model. And then the other program that we have, this one really is killing me. Project Involve is a mentorship program that we have it's for filmmakers from underrepresented communities, underrepresented in the industry. And it's a 9-month program. We take 30 filmmakers, and it's mentorship, master classes, but they make short films in this thing. And the development and the production of the shorts kind of provides the spine to the program. And these filmmakers have been developing great scripts, and they're ready to go. And they're supposed to be in production in May, which is not happening. And we don't know when they're supposed to finish the program in September. The films premiere September, October, and now that's all up in the air. So we might, I mean, I hate the thought that we would end up with these filmmakers came into this program with the promise of making shorts, and it's like, we don't know we don't know when that will happen. It will happen, but it could be a ways off.
Great. We'll switch gears and give you a breath for a second, Josh, but there's been a whole flurry of activity on the chat board about, you know, alternative screenings. And I think that, you know, just by seeing that, I get a lot of hope and I get a lot of excitement from that. I think, you know, going into a theater and watching a film, it's very similar to, at the moment, going to the theater or going to a ballet or going to a performance at the symphony. There's the actual physical space that the audience takes up, but there's everything to think about in terms of social distancing, from bathrooms to egresses and how people move through space and do their work. So, you know, we're all very film-centric creatives or cinematic creatives that are on this call, but I do see a flurry of conversation just around what could cinema look like unbound? What could it look like if it wasn't in a black, darkened space? I think it's really important that we continue to have those conversations here in Oregon. Also, just on the West Coast in general, it's been a topic of conversation with some folks I was speaking to in Seattle and San Francisco. So I think, you know, a lot of the same rules that we were talking about for production apply, that we don't want to be the place that does a blow up theater with the Hollywood and Film Independent and 3 other places, and then people get sick. It's really important to kind of go through that, and then also think about and share with each other ideas about how to project cinema on walls, on doors, on floors, and in new ways that people can enjoy. So I think it's fluid. I know that Tim mentioned that, you know, the Hollywood is thinking still that they're going to be screening in state parks July and August, at least for now. That is a fluid situation. Our opening of the Portland Art Museum and Northwest Film Center is obviously fluid as well. You know, we have a history as an organization of having done drive-ins at the Zidell Yards for years. I think one of the other funny things that I learned as a new transplant is that it doesn't get dark until way late. So that sounds pretty naive and pretty, I guess I am the virgin of the group here in Portland, but I think it's just something else to consider as we think about these options, that we want to make sure it's safe, we want to make sure it's viable, but also that it can really you know, help the community in a very real way. So I just want to acknowledge that, because there was like a 3-scroller of like drive-ins, yay! And if you haven't seen it, I know it's both a Film Independent supported project and something that I supported in my last life. Swallow, which is a pretty amazing indie movie, is the #1 movie in the country because it's playing at one drive-in in Central Florida. And Fill in the House, it's about a woman, total sidebar, but it's about a woman who has pica, which means that she eats inanimate objects uncontrollably. And it's a whole feminist thing, and it's amazing. And you guys should check it out when it comes onto VOD. But it's kind of amazing in this time that is the thing that's playing in a drive-in, and was the #1 film in the country last week. So hoorah. We have a couple more questions. I can't get my computer to work. Of course. Here we go. Mitchell, should filmmakers like myself continue to apply for Film Independent grants? Asking you, Josh. Asking for a friend, but asking for Josh. Hey, Josh, if you can hear me, you're on mute.
Sorry.
Got to
Okay.
do a shot now. There you go.
Yes, you should. And by the way, I'll give out my email. It's jwelsh@filmindependent.org. Anyone, if you have follow-up questions, it's the letter J, WELSH @filmindependent.org. Shoot me an email and I can answer it that way or connect you with somebody at Film Independent who can help. But we have a year-round grants and awards program where we give out, it's a mixture of cash grants and then also in-kind production services to filmmakers. It's a little complicated to answer your question directly or simply because some of those grants, you're only eligible for them if you've gone through one of our programs. Like Amy could apply for any of them, but if you haven't done one of our labs or been at the Spirit Awards or gone through Project Evolve, you may not be eligible for some, but some you are. We give out a number of grants for the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and those are wide open. So anyone who has any projects dealing with science and technology, we actually give out quite a lot of money for the Sloan Foundation to great projects that way. And I'm always shocked. We get a lot of submissions for them, but not as many as I would hope or expect, given the amount of grants that are available there. So I'm not saying to write a science film just for the money, but if you have an inclination in that direction, you should check out our website or drop me a line. But yeah, this is a great time I would say this is an excellent time for development, and where that includes like really researching what are the grants and what are sources of funding that you might be eligible for. The whole nonprofit film sector, Sundance, Tribeca, IFP, Film Independent, we're all like still here, still trying to serve filmmakers as best we can. And this is a great time to just talk to people at all those orgs and find out what's there that you could tap into.
Awesome. So we'll do one more question, and then if anybody else wants to chime in, please do either verbally or on the chat. But piggybacking, this one's from Randall. Piggybacking on Josh's comment about this being a really good time to write, it's also a really good time to read scripts. Josh, can you comment on how screenwriters can reach more indie makers? And I'm also hearing that many established filmmakers and stars in LA are reconsidering their pre-COVID commitments. They want to make something different, or they want to make something different now in light of this new reality. Are you hearing the same?
That's really interesting. I mean, I am sort of hearing that anecdotally that, I mean, there's a lot, who knows what's going to happen, but there's a lot of talk that when the first films to get made out of this will probably be much smaller, low budget films with really contained sets where, it's not some huge sprawling thing where the filmmakers can really, to make a safe set is going to be easier when you're smaller. So I think it's a hopeful thought for the indies that the first films coming out of this are going to be really true low budget independent films. In terms of how to get read, that's a really good point. I don't have a ready answer to that, but if you shoot me an email, I'd appreciate it, because that's something, you're right. This is a good moment to find new ways to get your work read. And the usual markets and festival-based markets where you might go, many of those are on hold or not happening, or moving online. So it could, I think people should think about, is there some platform or online market that could be created to help give more exposure to writers? That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Good question. Good question. Any last questions? Or anything that I didn't see when we had that flurry? You guys all kicked in. It was like you saw the clock getting towards 5 and everybody's like, got to get my questions in. It was amazing. Anything that I missed as you?
I just want to say it's really interesting to hear about production up there and starting to think through safe production models for when things come back online. I have had some producers reach out to me asking if we could start in LA sort of a working producers group to start talking through best practices. And so I'll follow up on that. I mean, I'll read your blog post and look at that. But yeah, that's going to be a lot to wrap one's mind around, of what that, because sets are so.
I'm going to actually send you a link from Variety.
Sorry?
I'm going to send you a link from Variety about Brian Kavanaugh Jones, and Automatic actually came out with this thing that you should look at. It's both interesting as well as severe. So I'll put it in the comments right now. Everybody can check it out. This is something that just came out today about some production modeling that's going on out of LA for smaller productions. And it has things like a 14-day quarantine for all cast and crew. And then when you're shooting, you're sequestered in a hotel and you never leave. So it's like summer camp. So it's going to work for some, but not for all. So I'll put that in the comments right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how or what the POV from the unions are going to be as well. Like, I don't know if that's on the schedule, but would love to hear from the union reps kind of what they're.
Yeah, so the IAA, SAG are both materially involved in the protocols we're doing here in the state, but in general, IAA, SAG, DGA are all already have their own protocols that are going, like Steven Soderbergh is doing the DGAs, or he's heading the committee that's doing the DGAs. All of that is going to be synthesized into ours as well as every other state's protocols in some form, because you're not going to be able to have your own that don't simulate the union. So that's all being sort of listened to and put together at the same time. And I think they're all going to come together, over the next couple of weeks for sure. In the short term, those things that are small enough to do that don't necessarily have those direct union connections, we definitely need to have safety protocols in place for those before the other documents come out. So we're trying to play both sides at the moment.
Cool. Thanks.
I don't know about you all. I learn something every week. I get humbled. I've kind of come into this call thinking we know where the call is going to go and we know who's going to talk, and then it takes a life of its own, and that's really exciting. And I think, I'm continuing to be inspired and find ways to innovate with you all. And I think that that's really exciting and encouraging too. One of the funniest comments that I've heard this week is that the biggest inspiration for somebody thinking about how theaters will work and how we'll come back into creative spaces has been their grocery store. And if you remember, and maybe it's the same in LA, I'm not sure, but certainly here in Portland, it was kind of a mad scramble for flour and toilet paper the first week. And by midway through, you kind of understood you should probably wear a mask and be a little kinder. And now we're like trained seals where there's circles on the floor and you go in a certain direction, and you thank the folks that are on the front line profusely, and you really understand the kind of commitment and supportive community that's happening at this moment. So I would just say, a huge thank you to all of you who contributed and showed up for this conversation. You don't have to be here. You could be doing anything right now, so it's appreciated. And a special thank you to Brian and to Tim, of course, and to Josh. You especially didn't have to do this.
Oh, thank you.
You are probably a little new to Portland, as am I, but it's an amazing bunch of folks, and I hope that you get to know each of these people as individuals, and certainly lean on us as your neighbor to the north for anything, whether it's production through Tim or resources for new filmmakers and artists to tap into. And I see a lot of board members. Don't think that I've forgotten you. I see 4 or 5 of you, and boy, this means a lot to all of us at the Northwest Film Center and to the community that you guys and ladies are all here today. So just a huge thank you, a big warm fuzzy. It was a really good call.
Thank you, Amy.
All right.
I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, if anything didn't get answered, you can reach out to me, to Tim. I'll throw Brian in there. Brian knows how to find us. So please let us know. And we can also, Josh was kind enough to give his email. So be kind back and reach out to him and keep it going.
Yeah, thanks for hosting this very much. Northwest Film Center, thank you guys for putting this together on a week-by-week basis. I'm with Amy. I learn something new every time we do this, and I love this group. So thanks for putting it together.
All right.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Josh.
Good to see all your smiling faces. Bye, everyone.
Good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.